34,000 years ago, in what is now Russia, someone buried two children head to head and covered their bodies in thousands of tiny hand-carved beads. Each bead took roughly 45 minutes to carve by hand. Whoever did this clearly believed the dead deserved more than just a hole in the ground, and that instinct goes back much further than you'd expect. So, who taught them to do this? The answer reaches back further than almost anyone realizes, and what it reveals about ancient humans is more surprising than anything you'd find in a textbook. Those two children at Sungir, the ones buried head to head beneath 10,000 ivory beads, weren't an anomaly. They were a late chapter in a story that starts so early it stops feeling like history and starts feeling like something else entirely. Pull back from Russia. Pull back from 34,000 years ago. Go to Keepsakes Cave in what is now northern Israel, around 100,000 years ago, 3 times further back than Sungir. Before any pyramid, before any written language, before agriculture, anatomically modern humans were burying their dead with deliberate care. Researchers found the remains of at least 15 individuals interred with red, ochre staining, and shell ornaments. These weren't bodies dumped in a convenient hole. The positioning was intentional. The objects were chosen. Someone stood over that grave and made a decision about what the dead should carry with them. That's the oldest confirmed intentional burial on record. 100,000 years of that impulse sitting in limestone before anyone thought to look. But here's where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable, because even that date might not be the beginning. In the 1950s, archaeologist Ralph Solecki was excavating Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan when he found the remains of several Neanderthals, a different species from us, with a brain shaped differently, a face shaped differently, a lineage that had diverged from ours hundreds of thousands of years earlier. What made headlines wasn't just that they were buried, it was what appeared to surround them. Dense clusters of pollen, suggesting that flowers, yarrow, groundsel, grape hyacinth had been laid across the bodies. Solecki called it a flower burial. For a generation, it was the most emotionally resonant finding in all of paleoanthropology. Then the skeptics arrived. Later, researchers pointed out that the pollen could have been carried in by burrowing rodents, or blown in by wind, or deposited by a bee species known to nest in caves. The flower burial, they argued, was wishful thinking. Humans projecting grief onto creatures we wanted to believe were more like us than they were. Fair enough. But here's what even the harshest skeptics concede. The Shanidar Neanderthals were deliberately placed. Not scattered. Not abandoned. Positioned. That much is not in dispute. Whatever the flowers mean or don't mean. Someone chose to put those bodies somewhere specific, and that choice is not random animal behavior. And then, the deepest cut of all, there is the Rising Star Cave System in South Africa. In 2013, researcher Lee Berger's team began pulling bones from a remote underground chamber accessible only through a passage so narrow that the excavation required specialist cavers. What they found were the remains of Homo naledi, a hominin with a brain roughly 1/3 the size of yours. Small, ancient, by most prior assumptions, not the kind of creature capable of symbolic thought. And yet the bones were deep inside a cave system with no obvious food source, no signs of predator activity, no reason to be there, except possibly that someone put them there. Berger's team published findings suggesting deliberate deposition. The debate in the field is fierce and unresolved, but if the interpretation holds, the impulse to honor the dead doesn't just predate civilization, it predates our species. Sit with that for a second. The question isn't just what ancient humans did when someone died. The question is whether the need to do something, anything, with the dead is so deep it may be older than Homo sapiens itself, so the rituals go back further than almost anyone assumed. But what were they actually doing, and what did any of it mean? That's where it gets stranger. The Shanidar Neanderthals were deliberately placed, not scattered, not abandoned. And yet some researchers still argue that's not enough to prove anything emotional was happening. Do you think deliberate placement alone is evidence of grief? Or does it take something more? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because what ancient humans were actually doing with their dead goes well beyond placement, and the details are stranger than you'd expect. Start with the ochre. Red ochre, iron oxide, or Fe2O3 if you want the chemistry, doesn't rot. It doesn't dissolve. It sits in soil for 100,000 years and waits. And it appears in burials across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East with a consistency that stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like something closer to doctrine. Researchers have proposed it symbolized blood, or life, or the promise of rebirth. Nobody has settled the question. What's settled is that people carried it deliberately, repeatedly, across every continent and across deep time, and pressed it into the earth with their dead. That's the thread the sun-gear children pull you toward. Those 10,000 ivory beads weren't just labor. They were a statement about what the dead deserved. And once you start looking at what other cultures decided the dead deserved, the picture gets both stranger and more familiar. Take Egypt. Mummification is easy to file under exotic ancient ritual and move on. But look at the actual logic behind it, and you're looking at something more raw than that. The embalmers removed the internal organs and sealed them into canopic jars. They packed the body in natron salt for 40 days to pull out every trace of moisture. They wrapped it in linen, coated it in resin, and placed it in a tomb stocked with food, tools, and personal objects because they believed the physical body had to survive intact for the soul to return to it. The brain was discarded. They thought it was irrelevant. The heart was left in place. They thought it was the seed of identity, the thing that made you you. That's not superstition. That's terror of non-existence dressed in ceremony. The question underneath all of it, whether any part of you continues after the body stops, is the same question you've probably turned over at 2 a.m. without arriving anywhere useful. The Egyptians just built an entire civilization around refusing to let the question go unanswered. The Greeks handled the same terror differently. The prothesis was the preparation of the body, laid out, mourned publicly, women tearing their hair in grief that was expected to be visible and loud. Then came the ekphora, the procession to the burial site with music and mourning chants. Grave goods went in, pottery, food, personal objects. The logic wasn't sentimental. An unhonored dead person was a dangerous dead person, a spirit with a grievance, capable of returning to settle it. Grief and fear were the same act. Roman practice split along class lines, patricians with professional mourners, ornate sarcophagi, and public ceremonies that announced status even in death, plebeians with plain wooden boxes and simpler rites. But both classes agreed on the underlying logic. A bad send-off had consequences for the living, the dead had power, and the living had obligations. Different cultures, different centuries, different continents, same architecture underneath. Which brings you back to Sungir, back to those 2 children and the person who spent what researchers estimate was years of accumulated labor producing 10,000 ivory beads, each one taking roughly 45 minutes to carve, and then place every single one of them in the ground where no living person would ever see them again. That's not practical. It doesn't help anyone survive. By any cold calculation of early human life, it makes no sense at all. And yet there it is, 34,000 years old, sitting in the archaeological record like a question that refuses to close. The rituals changed across every culture and every millennium. The specific logic shifted: rebirth, appeasement, status, connection. But the need underneath them never did. And the fact that you can look at a grave from 100,000 years ago and recognize the emotion that produced it, across that entire gulf of time, across every difference in language and belief and biology, might be the most human thing about any of this. Not that we bury our dead, but that we always have and we always had a reason, and the reason was never really about the dead at all. Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section down below what part of the ancient world I should explore next.